On February 24th, 2022, as the world watched, Russian forces launched a long-anticipated full-scale invasion across Ukraine's borders. The Kremlin reportedly expected Ukraine to fall in a little over 72 hours. But the Russian military soon faltered due to poor logistics and fierce Ukrainian resistance. The advance quickly devolved into the most brutal and destructive conflict on European soil since World War II. The video states that nearly 1 million casualties have been counted as of 2025. The eastern countryside, once lush with green forests and fields, has become a cratered landscape resembling the killing fields of World War I. Urban warfare in cities like Mariupol and Bakhmut has been compared to the bloody street fighting in Stalingrad 80 years ago. This conflict also provides a frightening showcase of modern warfare, with everything being recorded and videos going viral across social media. Unlike past wars known through vague newspaper descriptions, we now see raw, immediate combat. Men fighting to the death with knives, soldiers taking shelter in trenches as drones drop explosives, and men dodging incoming, tearing drones. Some drones even appear to mercilessly taunt wounded, surrendering soldiers, and the sound of their propellers has become a new form of PTSD. This starkly reminds us that despite new technologies, war never truly changes. With no end in sight, it's not about who is right, but who is left. However, like other wars, this conflict has produced something similar. With all the death and mayhem, soldiers on both sides have begun sharing strange and unexplained stories. As told by the men who fought and continue to fight, these are the true stories of the supernatural things they have encountered in Ukraine. While large-scale combat between Ukraine and Russia began with the 2022 invasion, the war has actually been ongoing since early 2014. Against the backdrop of the Ukrainian Revolution of Dignity, Vladimir Putin capitalized on the power vacuum in the nation's government, seizing the Crimean Peninsula under the guise of protecting its ethnic Russian population. Crimea, strategically vital as a naval hub on the Black Sea, allows control over the region's waters. As Russian forces secured the peninsula, pro-Russian separatist groups in eastern and southern Ukraine rose up against the new Western-leaning government, leading to clashes with the Ukrainian military as Ukrainian troops battled these separatist Western military PMCs were to counter Russian operations. Many believe that the Russian special forces were officially deployed on Ukrainian soil. One such contractor, referred to as Castro, later shared a story via email. His account offers a unique glimpse into the conflict's earliest stages and is considered among the war's earliest reported paranormal experiences.
Castro writes, I did 4.5 years as a security contractor for one of the larger U.S. defense contracting firms. Though primarily known for aerospace defense, their lesser-known security forces are often the breadwinner. Our security forces aren't a defensive force. We conduct offensive missions when needed, and that need arose in 2014 with the invasion of Crimea. I was young and just back from a stateside contract when I was notified I'd be going to Ukraine. It appeared Russia was using military contractors and flagless regular Russian army soldiers and special forces inside the peninsula. A military organization, not wanting official involvement but wanting to protect interests in mainland Ukraine, sent out contracts. While contractors fighting contractors is common in less developed nations, this was different. We knew we'd be facing actual soldiers, just not wearing a flag. 2 days later, 3 days after the invasion began, I was in Ukraine, shipped to the Crimean border, given assignments, and sent in. He describes the Ukrainian army then as great, the ones that stayed at least, but under-equipped, under-trained, and had no morale. They were hospitable, but it was clear the PMCs would be picking up the slack. Castro states he won't detail their assignments, which frequently involved resistance. Instead, he focuses on the less-known side of war. When sides clash, gunfire, explosions, death, suffering, it creates a lot of energy. He explains that anyone who's been there can attest to how thick the air gets after a gunfight, after bombs go off, the fog of war. In this fog, things can happen that no one either wants to openly acknowledge or stuff that people just refuse to acknowledge.
Castro states that neither of the following two stories are his own, but were told to him by people he wholeheartedly trusts. adding that for them to lie, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't match their character. The first story was told by his friend, Map Seams, a prior service Marine Corps veteran known for his map reading skills. One day, while working in command and control, Maps overheard a radio transmission from a patrol platoon. The distressed call came from Patrol 62, reporting heavy contact and a need for cover and fire. Patrol 62, P-62, comprised of 2 squads of 12 men, each 24 total, was on evacuation and patrol duties. According to Maps, P-62 first called in around 14:45 p.m., reporting heavy incoming fire and that they'd break contact and seek an alternate route, with no casualties reported. At 14:52, they called again, advising 1 truck was hit by an explosive and immobile. They were dismounting to other vehicles, reporting all 5 occupants injured but ambulatory. Command and Control then attempted to reach other platoons for assistance, but with no luck, as others were too far or engaged with enemy contacts. After a few minutes, multiple attempts to contact P-62 failed. 2 hours later, a final call came in, roughly at 17:09, just after 5 p.m., stating they were all wounded, some dead, and needed medevac. During that 2-hour period, Command had finally found enough troops, forming a quick reaction force, QRF, of 60 additional contractors and a few Ukrainian army stragglers. At approximately 18 o'clock, about an hour after P-62's last call, the QRF arrived to find all 24 men dead, their bodies in various locations. Castro calls this a tragic loss of life and our most significant during our time there. However, some things didn't really add up. Locals stated that the firefight started around 14:45 and stopped after about an hour with an aggressive push by the attackers, which would have been before or just after 16 o'clock, 4 p.m. Around this time, locals claimed they checked on the contractors after the attackers left and found several men still alive, but their attempts to save them failed. The locals said most men had been hit multiple times by gunfire and shrapnel, worried the attackers would return to scavenge for equipment and intel. They left quickly after about 20 minutes, adamant that they had checked all 24 contractors and all were dead before they departed. The question then arises, if this took place around 16 o'clock and all men were dead, who made the last call an hour later at 17:09 for a medevac? The last call gave Maps the impression the firefight lasted at least 2 hours, not one, contradicting the locals' accounts. Castro considers possibilities. Someone lived whom the locals didn't realize, or the locals lied. Regardless, he states that P-62, not their real call sign, was indeed lost that day, with all 24 killed in an ambush on an unmapped-out road. He also notes that most of their equipment, including comm gear, was damaged, and official releases indicated signs someone, possibly locals, tried to save a few men who were bleeding out. He concludes, regardless of what happened or whoever made that last radio call for medevac, we lost 24 Greek guys that day. Castro's next story happened while he was on site, but not directly involved. Task Force Blitz was a slowdown task force aimed at impeding Russian advancements. They frequently received outdated or incomplete maps, causing confusion when encountering unmarked roads or villages. GPS was unreliable due to weather. While en route to an assignment, units ahead of their column reported a cluster of approximately 40 houses and in buildings about half a mile east of their main road. Since the village wasn't on their maps and its clearance status was unknown, they decided to search it. Castro's squad of 10 and another 10 men dismounted and approached, joined by 2 armed Ukrainian interpreters. His squad approached from the southwest, the other from the northwest. They identified a gas station, about 25 homes and apartment blocks, a government-type building, and other structures. They systematically cleared each building, finding deceased people along the way. The village appeared almost untouched, with no signs of engagements like craters or bullet holes, as if everyone had simply packed up and left. But as they were finishing the search, the other squad emerged from an apartment block with 2 emaciated, starved children and a dog. Medics began treatment, a defensive perimeter was established, and an evacuation platoon was called. Later, Castro spoke with the guys who found them, referred to as Delta, Tango, and Papa. This is where the unexplainable begins. Tango and Papa were on point in the building, with Delta covering the rear. They reached an apartment door, confirmed it was firmly locked, and prepared to breach it with a Halligan tool. Suddenly, the door simply popped open before we could get the bar in the door jamb. From inside, all 3 heard what they perceived as an elongated whisper, which Delta described as loud enough to be distinctly in Ukrainian, though he couldn't. confirmed the exact words. They held their position until additional contractors arrived. Upon entering, they found the 2 children and the dog in the living room closet, covered by thick clothing. A woman was found in a bedroom down the hallway, appearing to have been dead for several days, if not at least a week, with the injuries believed to be from a brutal assault. Before hearing this story, Castro had heard and confirmed that an evac platoon had visited the same village about 5 days prior, followed 2 days later by another task force. Neither reported finding the children or the woman. However, it was later determined that members of the 1st evac platoon had committed crimes against women and children while searching the village, and the time frame seemingly lines up with their death. For Castro, the locked door is what stands out, as all 3 men confirmed it was locked and about to be breached before it simply popped open. He vouches for Tango's strong moral character, stating he wouldn't lie. Castro believes this truly happened and speculates that the woman, in whatever form she was in, was hanging on, watching after her kids. He ponders if she wanted to greet them as they crossed over, or if, realizing she couldn't save them, she did her best to protect them, perhaps by locking the door or, upon seeing their guys, opening it to allow her children to be saved. He concludes, "The last I heard, only the dog passed away, so she can rest knowing that we saved them." Fast forward 8 years from Castro's experiences to the winter 2020-22 Russian invasion. Many foreigners aided Ukraine's defense, forming the Ukrainian International Legion. Though reportedly only in the low thousands, Legion members are active on the front lines and have participated in major engagements. While confronting Russian forces, they've also had eerie brushes with the ever-growing paranormal phenomena. This next story, first shared with Tales from the Grid Square Project, comes from an anonymous International Legion member. He admits that combat stress and fatigue may have been a factor, but he can't shake the thought that it's just too bizarre and can only be defined as paranormal.
He writes, "I served in the Ukrainian Foreign Legion, and once during a 3-day mission I experienced something I couldn't explain. Our position was a small house on the edge of a village near the Kharkiv-Luhansk Oblast border. It was absolutely miserable, like an apocalypse movie. This was likely the last intact house in the town, the rest being rubble and dead bodies with everything on fire pretty much all of the time. In winter, snow was knee-deep, compounded by constant shelling, aircraft, and the risk of enemy infiltration."
One night on watch to the east, he had earlier confirmed the location of 2 dead Russians killed by their 2nd squad. These were part of a 4-man reconnaissance element that had probed their position days earlier, cut to ribbons with a machine gun. He only saw their bodies after village dogs started on them, noting one was decapitated with insides spilling out, and the other cut almost completely in half by machine gun fire or dogs. Scanning his sector with NVG's night vision goggles, he saw 2 shapeless black shadows rise up from the ground where these 2 corpses were and sort of just drift further up the road past our position. He was freaked out, but they didn't seem menacing, moving like they were just 2 shadow things going for a walk, like 2 people oblivious to the war around them. He initially attributed it to exhaustion, sleep deprivation, and fear, and the way NVGs tend to play with your head and make you see things. He had previously seen ghost people and shadow figures through his people and shadow figures through his ghost people and shadow figures through his odds. But then, his watch partner, a team medic, a doctor known for being very serious, no nonsense, whispered with a hint of shock and terror. "Do you see that?" Surprised and whispered with a hint of shock and terror. "Do you see that?" Surprised, he replied, absent-mindedly, asked if he should shoot them. The medic replied, "No, I think the time for that has come and gone. Just let them do their thing." They watched the 2 black figures move down the street, eventually float back to the bodies, and sink back into them. The rest of the night was fairly uneventful, with machine gun fire from a BTR and a few grad rockets. The following night, on watch from the south window, he observed an alleyway between a shed and a leveled building. Using a night civilian thermal scope, he kept feeling compelled to look down the alley. He saw a shape, not a heat signature, but a white shape on the black hot thermal feed, clearly a person. He could make out the distinct phallic shape of the 6 Bravo 47 helmet magazines on a chest rig, with the weapon pointed directly at him but no heat signature. Since black hot thermal would show a person as black, thermal would show a person as black. This meant the figure was colder than the frigid air around him. He also couldn't see his breath. While he considered winter clothing or thermal camo, he reasoned that even then he should have seen exhalation up close. He chose not to shoot it, not wanting to draw unnecessary attention or react to an overactive imagination. He watched this extremely cold Russian, who was invisible with NVGs due to darkness, train his weapon on him for an hour or so. After another barrage of grads, he looked away, and when he looked back, the Russian was gone.
He states, "I'm a Christian. I believe the dead have no account for the living, but I can't explain what I saw that night." He speculates, maybe those two dead Russians hadn't left this world yet, trying to finish their reconnaissance mission in vain. Maybe that Russian I saw in the alley was one of those souls not ready to depart this world, angrily trying a futile attempt at payback. Just some poor fool that didn't understand that it doesn't work that way.
While preparing this episode, something Castro told the narrator in an email really stuck in his head. Regarding the supernatural in warfare, Castro believes that when you have so much energy being expended, gunfire, explosives, yelling, loss of life and limb, that has to leave something. He draws a parallel. Friction creates heat. Flowing water creates force. Wind creates movement. War and violent death creates something, or at least feeds something. The narrator finds this an interesting thought, almost a scientific application for the paranormal, but notes that people who experience such things will try to make sense of them. He reiterates that the war in Ukraine is horrific and, like all in Ukraine, is horrific and, like all wars, will inevitably end. Though it's just the number of people who have to die first that we don't know yet. War is an ugly thing, and like other European wars, the land will heal. Cities and towns will be rebuilt, along with the shattered lives of the families who remain, whose only thought will be wanting to leave the war behind. However, stories like these really do make you wonder about the dead. What happens to them? I suppose you and me will both find out one day. The narrator thanks viewers for sticking around for the after action and shares his appreciation for these stories. He notes that regardless of one's belief in the content, they offer a much more closer perspective on the war itself or military service in general. A first-hand account of what was actually happening on the ground. He feels this is valuable, as alternatively when you hear about war, you're usually getting kind of a bird's-eye view of what's happening. These stories, however, put us on the ground walking through the experiences of the individual, covering both paranormal and conventional wartime experiences and, more broadly, the psychological impact of what they're facing each and every day. A second point, related to the first, is that it's easy to get caught up in the headlines, the politics, military strategy. But behind all of that are real people, as seen in this episode, real lives that are being shattered by the war, families shattered by the war, families, homes being destroyed. The channel's content, whether one believes in the paranormal or not, serves as a constant reminder of the human cost of conflict, both for people who died and also for the survivors. It's a look into the mind of somebody who's on the ground there. The narrator acknowledges comments from some viewers who dismiss these stories as complete nonsense, attributing them to soldiers being sleep-deprived. He clarifies that he's never not admitted that is the case, as he himself has experienced seeing things when very tired. Yet, even if one doesn't believe in the paranormal, he considers this a fascinating look into the human mind on the front lines of war, because regardless of what the cause is, this is what these men are experiencing and then having to cope with and deal with on the back end of the war. These stories stick with them, often lingering in the back of their mind when they discuss their experiences. The lingering question from this episode is what happens to the dead, but also what becomes of the people who have these strange experiences and spend the rest of their lives with unanswered questions about them. He concludes that this is what Wartime Stories is here to explore, thanking viewers for listening, watching, subscribing, liking, and commenting, as all of these things really help support the channel. The line between reality and the inexplicable often blurs in war. What's your take on these chilling encounters? Drop a comment. And if you want to support more investigations into the unknown, hit that like button and subscribe now.